Hey everyone. First of all, thank you so much, Mantle, for organizing this amazing event. And it's actually a privilege to be in the same room as so many people who've built such incredible things in Shopify. And right after the talk, just grab Jordan because it's his birthday today. So happy birthday, Jordan. All right. So, a little background. I'm the co-founder of Foxsell Bundles. We are an enterprise bundling solution. We are right now working with about 3,000 brands, 40 plus agencies for all their mix and match needs, for BFCM strategies, dynamic pricing. And we are very thankful that we've been fortunate enough to help brands scale without any issues. And we've consistently learned this that less infra you maintain, the more merchant value you can add. So this talk is not just theoretical, it's actually comes from years of experience and actually building scale apps that could scale. So what this talk is really about? This is not a deep dive into a specific API or a framework. It's about mindset shift, right? It's about recognizing when Shopify has already done heavy lifting for us and how we can leverage that technology. Oh, I can wait. I have memorized everything. Yeah. So it's about recognizing when Shopify has done a lot of heavy lifting for us and how we can leverage that to build very scalable, reliable, secure, and cost-efficient apps, right? So the format of the talk is very simple. We'll go through some of the use cases and we'll draw a parallel between how it was done before the Shopify launched a lot of native technologies and how you can do it after the native technologies are launched and how we can leverage them, right? So let me ask you one thing. How many times during a BFCM, during a peak season, during a sale season, have you had crashes for your app for a certain feature because just it didn't scale accordingly, the volume was too insane for a lot of apps to handle, or it just didn't work out? How many of you? Oh, we've all been there. Or maybe sometimes what happens is it doesn't crash, right? But the AWS bill or your cloud infrastructure, it just spikes up. The cost is insane because you're doing CDN, you're serving your content from CDN and just showing like a small product widget on the storefront just because it's for 5 million people per day. It's just the cost is insane, right? And according to some studies as well, right, 9% of private B2B SaaS ARR goes into infrastructure and DevOps, right? And that's a huge amount, insane amount, right? And that's assuming your server does not crash during the load. So that is one of the problems when building heavy infra apps on Shopify that does not scale with volume, that they become a liability when your merchant needs them the most, right? And actually, Shopify already solves a lot, right? We often forget that Shopify knows how to handle scale, they know how to handle security, and they know how to handle authentication and everything. So if we are able to leverage that technology, we can build really scalable apps. So I just want to introduce you to the Shopify native tech stack, which is Shopify Functions, theme app extensions, checkout UI extensions, which is for Plus only, customer account extensions, metafields, meta object, and storefront APIs. There are a lot more, like Shopify flows definitely get some mention, but we'll mostly focus on these use cases because these are more related to apps and more related to tech. So let's talk about how we can use metafields in replacing your CDN and API layers, right? So imagine you have a case where you want to show product badges on the storefront. And if you were to use your native servers, right, you would have a CDN setup, and then you would have an API layer behind that CDN, and behind that would be caching, it would be database, right? This is how you would do it. But if you're using metafields, what you can do is you can just have a product resource on Shopify, add a metafield on top of that, and it's automatically accessible on Liquid, on Storefront API, on your theme app extensions, on your customer accounts. These metafields can be queried anywhere, right? And it's zero infrastructure cost for you. Uh, and one more great way of using metafields is actually app integration, which I wanted to touch upon, right? So imagine a use case where there is a page builder app and there is a reviews app. So page builder app needs to create sections around how you would show carousels for top rated products, a featured product section, and to build trust among the customers for the merchants, right? You have to show the reviews. Now, if you want to show the reviews, a page builder app either needs to query reviews apps API for in real time to show the reviews, or they have to run a daily sync or hourly sync or a periodic sync to get the reviews into their system so they can showcase that essentially correctly, right? But what if a review app writes to a product meta field about an aggregate data of the reviews, right? It could be like what is the rating of that product, what are the reviews of that product, and page builder app can just read that meta field, right? So that is a very common architecture that we follow in microservice pattern, which is shared database architecture, but shared database without actual database and actual server cost. So this is one really good way of storefront APIs, how they could integrate with each other and work together. So we'll go to another use case for native tech, which is Shopify Functions. So this is one tweet that we posted during our BFCM when a lot of people were actually scaling their servers and just preparing for BFCM. We use Shopify Functions very heavily, so we did not have to do anything. Shopify was scaling their servers to support us. Right. So what eventually happened when we used function very effectively and very natively? We had zero support tickets during BFCM. It reduced our support tickets. It had a consistency across cart and checkout, so we don't have to build separately for cart. We don't have to build separately for checkout. It just works on the both consistently, right? And it scales with volume. So if Shopify is getting scale, if your brand is getting scale, Shopify does the heavy lifting. We don't have to do anything. So it actually works without any server crashes, without any failures, right? And we'll just see how a common use case that a lot of people faced issues in the past. We can solve that with functions now. So discount logic. So discount was one of the major common points of failure during PFCMs, during peak seasons, during sales, right? And for discounts to work, what you would had to do was you would uh, create a cart experience where you would show the discount. Sometimes you would have to make an API call to do actual calculations for the discounts. And you would have to replicate the same logic for Shopify Plus brands on Shopify scripts, right? Now what you have to do, just have to create a single function. It executes instantly with full access to cart state. You don't write a server, you don't scale a DB, and you just ship business logic and Shopify executes it for you, right? And the last thing that we'll see as a use case would be customer accounts, because that's where Shopify is also heading, and like people are just talking about it so much, right? So what a brand needs from their customer account page, they need customer details, then they need their order history, and then they would need like if they do have any loyalty points and all that sort of things, right? So if you were to do it earlier, you would have to have like a full blown section, or you would have to have a custom front end. You would have to handle the auth to your servers. You would have to create admin API. You would need to use admin API to fetch the order history, order details, and then you would use an API for fetching the loyalty points, right? And now, so everything is hosted by you. It's insanely expensive. The latency is too high. Now what you do is if you use the Shopify customer accounts, you already have the auth on Shopify. You don't have to do that. You use the storefront API for You use the storefront API to query the orders. So order list is also not on your server. And for the loyalty points, you just have to populate the customer metafields. So for populating customer metafields, that's also accessible right there. So essentially, moving the complete stack to Shopify stack actually saved you insane amount of cost. It became super performant, and it just works out of the box for merchants, right? So this is not visible at all, but that is why I'm here, right? I will read this. So whenever we are thinking of a feature of how to build, we follow this flowchart on how do we decide then when to go native, when to build hybrid, and when to build a custom infra, right? So first we decide what surface are we customizing for. It could be the checkout, customer account, theme, or PDP. If it's checkout, we check if the merchant is on Plus, and if yes, does the checkout extension storefront API actually covers all the use cases? Can you query using storefront API to get all the data? And does checkout extensions, UI limitations, whatever they are, does that work? If yes, then we go native. If no, then we go hybrid, right? We make some calls to the API server, and then we try to work around that. If the brand is not a Shopify Plus, we see if the functions and cart widgets can cover it. If yes, then we can go full native. And if no, then we again go hybrid. If the surface is customer accounts, and if the extension designs constraints similar to checkout are acceptable, and does the storefront API have all the data similar? We go native. And if no, then we have to go hybrid. And if the extension designs constraints are does not work for you, then we have to build custom infra from scratch. And if it's a theme and PDP, can our data be stored in metafields and meta objects? If yes, then we go native, because essentially we build theme app extension, liquid sections, anything that is part of the native, right? And if no, then we go hybrid. So it's very basic flowchart that helps you decide, like, do I want to create native? Do I want to build infra, custom infra, or do I want a combination of both? But native infrastructure is amazing, right? But it does have its drawbacks. It's not exactly perfect, right? So for example, checkout UI extensions are Plus only. It's an insane way of customizing the checkout, but you can't do it for any brand that's not Plus. If it's a brand that is not on Plus, you would have to go with Shopify Functions. You would have to go with building no, presentation layer yourself for the cart. Then it's the UI extensions have layout limitations, right? So you make a trade-off of speed and compatibility and reliability when you choose to build on the extensions that Shopify provides. But the problem with that is it does not have pixel perfect design. You don't get 100% control. So if that is not for you, then that is something that you can't use, right? And functions and all these extensions, they do have a learning curve, right? Because they are not following the traditional patterns of the backend and front end development that we're used to, right? Shopify, now you're working with inputs, outputs, WebAssembly, and then you have to work with declarative UIs, you have to work with GraphQL. Nothing is conventional, right? So that has its own learning curve. So debugging, it's not as simple. The hiring is not as simple, right? And then complex ASIC logic require custom infra. So if you have still a lot of background processing, if you have a lot of asynchronous processing, and very custom complex logic that just doesn't work with like current APIs, you would still have to build custom infrastructure. So going native does not mean that you completely avoid building infrastructure. It means choosing it deliberately. So choosing it only when it actually adds value to the brand, instead of just building your infra and taking all the costs in. And we do have some takeaways. Oh, takeaways. Yeah. So Shopify has already solved a lot of things. So I would say don't build what Shopify has already solved, because Shopify should be able to handle scale better than most of the apps can. So just trust Shopify on that. And the great thing about native stacks is it gives trust to a lot of brands and agencies, because you are not the one handling a very core logic for them. Shopify is doing, and they trust Shopify really well because they are building their business on Shopify, right? So that are all the takeaways, and that's it. uh, if you want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me on socials, you can check the website, and that's pretty much it, guys. Yeah. Thanks, man. I do still, I think we have some time for questions because it's got early. So, yeah, we have questions.
You talked about native, and that's great. But one of the struggles we've been having is analytics.
Yeah.
How do you handle analytics?
So analytics is one of the things that we also do in our app. The questions you need to ask yourself in analytics is like, does do you want to do analytics in real time, or do you want to give analytics that merchant just can take a look and then go? So for us, we talk to a lot of our agency partners, a lot of our brands. The behavior of a merchant for any app was just open, see once a day or twice a day, and see how much bundle sales they are doing, how many bundles they are selling, what are the products inside the bundle they are selling. So instead of processing insane amount of webhooks that you might not even need most of the times, what we do is we run cron jobs, and we just sync the orders every 3 hours, 6 hours, based on like what the merchant's patterns are, and that is where we handle the analytics. But of course, like if it's a real-time analytics that you would need, you would have to shift to custom infra, which you would have to separate it out from your app servers, because once the webhook loads become really high, you don't want your app to go down, right? So yeah, does that answer your question?
It does.
Oh. Does anybody has any other question? All right, thanks guys for coming.
Thank you so much, Prakhar. We are officially back on schedule.